Welcome to ieltsDragon. Let's answer the recent IELTS speaking topic about a place you visited that is polluted. Let's talk about a landfill in part 2, and in part 3 we will tackle the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, and whether the world leaders are seriously taking action to improve the condition of the environment. Without further ado, let's begin. Here's the cue card. Describe a place you visited that is polluted. You should say what the place is, where it is, what type of pollution it has, and explain the cause and effect of pollution. Now, let's start developing our story. In the first place, nobody really wants to pay a visit to a place that is polluted because it's simply disgusting. But let me share an interesting and awakening story of mine when I visited a village that's located close to a landfill during my university days. I had a subject called community development in which I needed to study some social issues in a certain community for my research paper. I decided to visit the neighboring town because I knew it was the perfect place since it's a poverty-stricken town, meaning to say I could study major social issues that the locals were experiencing. So I coordinated with some local officials, and they took me to a small village but very populous, which was situated a few meters away from a landfill. Let's understand the composition of this introduction first, before we continue. Now, look at the first paragraph. I developed my introduction by stating my own opinion of a polluted place. Then I dived into talking about my experience of visiting a polluted place which was awakening to me. That alone helped me showcase my language skills to the examiner, which is extremely helpful in achieving better marks in the criteria of fluency and coherence and lexical resource. Now for the second paragraph, I started to develop a background story of my monologue. I talked about the reason as to why I needed to visit that polluted place. This part helped my examiner understand my intention of visiting that place. That served as a support to my introduction. Now let's continue and finish our story. When I got there, I was appalled by the condition of the area, not because it's a slum, but because of the inexplicable smell of the place caused by the landfill. There were excavated areas with lots of garbage that weren't filled with earth yet, and I did believe that that was the reason why the place smelled fusty and overpowering. I was at a loss for words seeing the situation of the people living in that area. I knew how unsanitary the place was for the residents and how it affected their overall health, and I learned that some of them had respiratory illnesses because of the condition of their place. Anyway, after I conducted some interviews to some locals in that place, I realized how unfair life was and how privileged I was for living a life that's a complete opposite to the residents there. Since then, I reminded myself that I had no right to complain about some petty things since there were more people who wanted a life like mine that's healthy and free from pollution. Now, let's proceed to our analysis on how I develop more details of my story and how I end the story. Look at the third paragraph. I described how polluted the place was, which now helped the examiner understand the situation of that place better. I used some good descriptive words to describe the place and provided some important details that would make the examiner picture out the place. Also, I talked about the impact of pollution to the health of the residents. The fourth paragraph served as my ending, in which I shared my own reflection or the life lesson I learned from visiting that polluted place. This also supported my introduction when I said that the story was awakening for me. This surely achieved the coherence of my story. You have to make sure that your story achieved that criterion, so your ideas would not be all over the place. Coherence is very important. Now, let's start answering part 3 questions. Take a look at the part 3 questions here and let's provide a well-discussed answer to each of them. We have to make sure that our examiner will be satisfied with our answers. Now let's begin. First question. What do you think are the common environmental problems that are affecting many countries these days? Well, the primary environmental problem that is greatly affecting the world is the excessive greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, from the burning of fossil fuels for electricity, and the heat generated from using some products like appliances that contain greenhouse gases that are used in businesses and homes. These greenhouse gases trap the heat in the atmosphere and make our planet Earth warmer. As a result, sea level rises due to the melting of ice in both North and South poles. Another problem is the intemperate use of plastic, which contributes to tons of garbage around the world that kills many living organisms like the marine lives. These two major environmental problems have not been properly addressed by the world leaders, and sadly, we are already paying the price for our actions, such as experiencing the high increase of temperature and the irregular weather conditions. Now, let's proceed to our analysis. So here, I gave my answer right away by explaining about greenhouse gas emissions and how it affected the atmosphere and the sea level. I did use some topic vocabulary words to my answer that helped me express my ideas even better. Then I transitioned to giving another important problem, which was about the tons of garbage and how it impacted living organisms. And after that, I simply ended my answer by giving a conclusive statement emphasizing the fact that the current generation is already experiencing the bad results of people's maltreatment of the environment. Now let's proceed to the second question. Second question. What do you think is the world's worst environmental disaster caused by humans? I consider the nuclear power plant accident in Chernobyl, Ukraine, as the world's worst environmental disaster caused by humans. If my memory serves me right, the explosion happened in 1986. Well, I was not born at that time yet, but I read several articles of that nuclear power plant disaster, and what I learned was that one of the reactors of that power plant was defectively designed, and some inadequately trained plant operators made a mistake during their safety test operation in that plant. That disaster displaced many people, and many were killed due to acute radiation syndrome. Not only that, the site and the neighboring places were incredibly contaminated with radioactive materials that made people abandon their homes. The Chernobyl accident is the world's dangerously unique environmental disaster. Now, let's analyze how I developed and discussed my answer here. I was very straight to the point when I answered that question. I talked about one nuclear power plant disaster that's popular in the world. I just simply gave the examiner an idea about the disaster and then emphasized the effects of that disaster to people and the environment. If you notice, I used some very good topic vocabulary words that aided me to express my answer better, and that surely helped me achieve a very good mark in the criterion lexical resource. Now, let's continue to the next question. Third question. Do you believe that the problems of pollution will be better in the future? I really want to believe that. However, day by day, I'm getting skeptical because world leaders are not really serious about improving the condition of the environment. World conferences about addressing the environmental issues are just a facade. If they take action very seriously to improve the condition of the environment, many businesses will be affected. For instance, if electric cars are heavily promoted and supported by governments for the purpose of massively reducing air pollution, oil companies will suffer, and that will imperil the world economy. That is something we cannot afford to bear. If we also use electric cars, we will be burning more fossil fuels to make those cars work, and that too is harmful to the environment. So we do not have any better choice, and that makes me believe that the condition will not be better in the future, especially on the issue of air pollution. Well, I'm just being realistic. So let's understand the composition of my answer here. I simply expressed my skepticism about the issue confidently and provided my realistic reason. Then I gave an example that would surely support my argument, and that helped me explain my stance to the examiner better. Part 3 is your opportunity to express your opinion, which is a very good chance for you to showcase your language skills, so make sure not to give a half-baked answer. If you find value to this channel, don't forget to subscribe. If it's not too much to ask, leave a like, and if you have questions or comments, feel free to write them below. I would love to read and answer them. Thank you for watching. Until the next lesson, have a lovely day.